When we're looking at reharm, there's a lot of different approaches that one could take, and a lot of sort of basic concepts that can be used and stretched out to much more advanced sounds and advanced colorings. I think it's important that when you are first working with reharm, that you don't do anything terribly crazy. That a lot of times, if we just think of ourselves as sort of tweaking the color a little bit, or sort of enhancing the color, either darkening it or brightening it with maybe some extensions and other colorings, I think a lot of times it's the most effective way to begin. Sometimes through this process, you'll find that you'll end up in a completely brand new area without straying too far away from sort of the original key. One idea of tweaking a particular color is just by adding extensions. So rather than just having C minor 7, we're thinking C minor 9, C minor 11, something that just gives us a little bit more color maybe than it was originally given on the lead sheet. If we're dealing with coloring, sometimes this might include giving some extensions that are altered, such as C minor major 7 or C minor 7 flat 6, something that sort of changes the color rather dramatically from its original intention. The second sort of approach to reharm is thinking something that's diatonic or something that's relative to the original chord. A lot of times this will keep you with a sound that's somewhat close to the original sound, but with an entirely different root and sometimes in an entirely different key. One approach you can take to sort of find possible substitutions is by making sure you sort of spell out the chord and then potentially maybe remove the root. So in this case, if we take away the root for a C minor chord and out on the ninth, we now have an E flat major 7 chord. If we were to move in the opposite direction, and in this case move a third or add a third below the chord, we now have an A flat major chord. We could keep the B flat and have an A flat major 9, but in this case I'm just trying to give us 7th chords. So now you have two different chordal areas you could work from, E flat major 7 or A flat major 7, and then things can get even more colorful when we start thinking about cadential progressions that work in those keys. E flat 7 moving to A flat major, or B flat 7 moving to E flat major. If you start using some tritones, you can see also where we might get some more chromaticism, and in places that we might not normally think of when we think of C minor 7. So we might be able to get A7 moving to A flat major, or E7 moving to E flat major. If we consider where we started, C minor 7, A7 and E7 are sort of dramatic shifts from that sort of original key. You'll always want to make sure that whatever you reharm works well with your melody, but there are lots of ways where we can sort of almost immediately escape to new and different places. Of course, if you wish to stay more diatonic, instead of having A flat be the root of C, you could have the root just be A, and we end up with A half diminished, which also again puts us in a completely different sort of soundscape, totally different place. The role of A minor 7 flat 5 is usually in 2 in some chord, some minor 2 5. So now instead of having C minor 7 as your sort of tonic chord for whatever it is you're in, now you're in a place where you're in sort of more transitionary material, which again harmonically can put you in a potentially fun place. As you're using these approaches, I would strongly encourage you to sort of weave back and forth between using some of these newer chords as well as some of the chords that are originally in the piece, so that it maintains some level of familiarity. If everything is reharmed, a lot of times you run the potential of just having the song sound like a completely brand new song, and in which case I just always encourage people, if that's the direction you feel like it's going, you might as well just save yourself some copyright expenses and just write your own song. If the goal is to reharm, then I think sort of we want to make sure that we sort of handle with care, that we maintain some identity of the original composition. Another approach you could take when reharm is picking chords that are unrelated to the original key, but might present what would have been melody notes as chord tones, now present melody notes as non-chord tones or as color tones. If we think about this example, for instance, C minor 7, if we substituted it with D major 7 sharp 11, if your melody note was any chord tone from C minor 7, C, E flat, G, or B flat, Now all of those chords are beautiful color tones in the key of D flat 7, right? And it's the 7th, 9th, sharp 11th, or 13th. So you'll really be able to maximize a lot of color. When you're dealing with sort of unrelated chords, one helpful thing is to think about whatever your melody note is. In this case, if we were considering the melody note as being C, you would want to figure out what key is C the root, what key is C the 9th, what key is C the 3rd, what chord has C as the 11th, what chord has C as the 5th, what chord has C as the 6th, and sort of working your way backwards and seeing where you end up. Of course, when you find a chord that you like, you could always end up creating some type of cadential progression around that, 5-1 or flat 2-1, that creates something interesting. Finally, our last sort of reharm approach is using some type of pedal point. In this case, a lot of times we might be changing the bass notes around to create something that's much more static, something where the bass doesn't change, but maybe the other existing harmony does. This has a rather fascinating effect on songs, and sometimes can feel like it's slowing down the harmonic motion, even though we still have chords happening. One example is taking songs that, or taking a chord progression that falls within a given key and putting it over a root that falls in that given key. So in this case, putting a variety of chords that are in C minor or E flat major over C has one sort of very interesting effect. Of course, you could think things that are more cadential. Pianists like to use this all the time, especially when sort of elongating a 2-5-1. If we had a 2-5-1 in the key of E flat major, a lot of times it's very possible to take 2, F minor in this case, and put it over B flat, and you sort of end up with like a B flat sus sound going to B flat 7, a lot of times using like a flat 9 or something to give it additional coloring before moving on to E flat 7. So there's this idea that pedal point can also sort of sustain or sort of slow down harmonic rhythm in a rather effective method. Again, with all of these ideas, one quick note. When you're dealing with pedal point, a lot of times if you're writing a vamp or something else with hits, it usually works very well for creating something that's interesting. Again, the idea with all of these, again, is that we're taking an existing sort of melody and we're just trying to come up with some additional color, maybe move it into a different direction for a soloist, maybe create something that's more interesting to solo on, or maybe something that fits better within a given key. And I think all of these techniques allow for that. I would just, again, say with discretion, be careful about over reharming and creating something where the song doesn't sound like it's, doesn't completely sound like it's in original form, because at that point you might as well just write your own tune.